Hey, welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. We're doing another homestead episode. I want to talk a little bit. None of this is very practical at the moment, but I want to talk about a few things. So I've been through this several times now. It's almost like I'm a serial homesteader, and we're about to do a more massive move than we did last time. And that brings with it some new infrastructure projects that we need to talk about if you're considering an off-grid life or just getting out of the cities. So there's different levels of doing that. And the last time we did this, we got into a place that had an established septic tank, a building, and grid electric, what they call mains electric, but grid electricity. We had a grid tie. And that's all very interesting and good, but it ties you up into to a certain extent, it ties you up into what's already there. And that there's a lot of positives to that, okay? If you don't know anything about a septic system, it's good to have one that you can learn on. For an example, having water, having a well, there's a lot of that goes on. So right now, just because of the region I'm in, I'm going to talk a little bit about high desert, plateau, rim, low desert even, the desert southwest, the mountain west, the desert southwest, and some of the factors that you want to consider if you're buying land out here. I highly recommend that you take a look at it because there's still some remote land that is accessible and cheap. In some parts of Arizona, you're going to have a map platted road. So the roads are there, but they may not be built. They may not be graded, but they're mapped out. And what that means is that you don't have a lot of properties that are completely landlocked. So landlocked property is a property where you have no right-of-way, no actual easement to access to your property. It's behind someone else's, and you have to deal with the negotiation with the neighbors over access. And that can get a little dodgy at times. Not always, and it's not an absolute no-go in terms of purchasing a property, but one of the advantages in places like some parts of Arizona and New Mexico and Colorado and even Utah is that there are counties, places where you have the streets already mapped. They may not be present. You may still be cutting some brush and dragging a chain across the roadway, but they're mapped, which means no one can actually argue that you don't get to access the road. That's a really good thing. And roads are often just easements, but that's fine too. Access is a big deal. Water is, in my opinion, the least of the big deals at first, to a large extent. Now, when you go out there, you're thinking about this from a survivalist point of view, from the completely remote, I'm never going to go to town point of view, and that's really not how it goes. Okay, that's not how it works. You're never going to do that. So right now it's about 150 city dwellers, okay? I mean, like in the city, people use 100 gallons of water a day. That's insane, right? So here you're going to be out in conservative ecologist land. Don't worry about it. Make sure that you do what you need to do or can do to make it work properly for you. Get good tanks. If you've got a hillside, get a gravity feed system. Make sure that you have road access to fill up the tanks. And that can literally mean just hoeing the cholla cactus out of the way. Just make sure that the truck can get there. Your truck, somebody else's truck. Because that helps a lot to have fill the tanks from above, have the tanks above the land, the property, and then have gravity feed. That's the easiest way to do it. A water pump is not a problem. It's just like a well pump, but it's going to take less energy because you're not actually pulling the water up from 100 feet, 200 feet, 1,000 feet underground. It's all easy. It's all very simple. Just make sure that you do what you can to have a water tank. Okay, if you move out with an RV, that's fine too, but go buy a 1,000-gallon water tank. Plan that into your ideas, into your budget. Okay, you may be looking at a $2,000 piece of property that's only 2 acres, and that's totally fine. You know, if it backs up on state land or BLM land, that's even better. Even if it's a little harder to get to, that's fantastic, because yes, it does mean that you have a public lands backyard that you can use and other people can use it, but the truth is there's not that many people out there, so you're going to be pretty comfortable. That's number one, having water. Number two is what to do with the water. Most of the time, if you have a decent mapped, engineered, permitted, official septic system, the counties out here are just going to leave you alone as long as you don't make it look really bad, okay? There's nothing wrong with having a car forest or having a junkyard, but you got to kind of keep it looking like it's the real deal. As long as you have septic. Most people have a problem with shit. So you have to have a place to shit. And a proper septic system is your biggest deal. That's probably next to access, making sure that you don't have a really bad time getting to the property. The next most important thing is going to be septic. I talked about water first because it's usually the first thing in people's heads, but it's less important because it's easy to get. It's easy to have a water truck. It's easy to have like a tank in the back of your pickup. Lots of people in Arizona, New Mexico, and in Utah have big ag tanks, big square ag tanks, these 300-gallon tanks, and they're just in the back of the truck all the time. You fill them up when you want to, and you empty them when you want to. It's part of life. It's one way to do it. A lot of people have them on little trailers, the little Harbor Freight trailers. That's another way to do it. You know, you have to make sure that how much water, make sure you're intelligent about the trailer. Do the basic math. 8 pounds per gallon. If your trailer is going to carry 1,000 pounds, then you've got 100 gallons, because you got to have your wiggle room there. All right. If you want a 500-gallon tank on the trailer, you need electric brakes. You need a proper 2-axle trailer. Just know what you're doing. The Harbor Freight trailer is absolutely fine for dragging around 75 or 100 gallons of water. Just not more than that. So water, I keep talking about water, it's of tertiary importance, okay? Right up there, next to each other, like I can't even tell you which one is probably more important, is your septic and your access. If you've got septic and you've got access, everything else is easy. Dealing with the weather, dealing with the wind, insulation, building styles, construction, whether you're earth bag or hay bale or just piling rocks or digging a hole in the ground, all of that is figurable, okay? Food independence is a completely different topic which requires a lot of discussion and a lot of talking and a lot of community. You're going to have to deal with the fact that community is in fact a thing, something you're going to have to look at and worry about. But to get on your land, to gas and septic are the biggest things. Septic usually out in the countryside is not going to be too expensive. You don't have to plan septic for 10 people and a 4-bedroom house. You don't have to do that. And you can make your septic work for you. You can use it less. There's a lot of things you can do. I'm not going to talk too much about some of the stuff that you're not supposed to do, like peeing on your fence line, which keeps certain animals out. Like you don't pee outside. No one pees outside. Oh no, use your septic tank. But you can manage your septic in a way that actually extends its capacity. What you put in it, how the biology of it works. This is not difficult stuff. Okay, having clean gray water, because that becomes another issue, and you don't want to talk about that too much because people really don't understand gray water, and counties don't understand gray water. And even though you have projects being funded by the University of Arizona to deal with that, it's not mainstream. It's not something you want to talk about with your county planners. Okay, plan your septic, do your septic, and then figure out your homestead stuff after that. That's all I'm going to say about that. You should be able to put in a septic for a couple $1,000s. How much work you're willing to do and how much work you need to get the tractor guy out for, all of that matters. One of the cheapest and easiest ways to do it, if you are not actually building a permanent piece of house right away with all the engineered plans and everything, if you're not doing this at the $100,000 level, one of the easiest things to do is literally build a septic system for an outhouse. Put up a cinder block or a little prefab building. You've got your throne in there. You also have a water tank in there. That helps keep your water from freezing, because yes, deserts do freeze. It handles things better. It keeps stuff up. You can make it so it's very lockable, and it's very inexpensive. And the county will be very happy with you. It's very hard for a county to fight a homesteader if the homesteader has a septic tank. That's your big core, biggest deal there. So I want you to think about that. I want you to look at that. I want you to start planning for your septic system. Okay? So don't overbuy your property. Remember that you have to be able to afford. Don't get attached to the dream property. Don't get sold a loan that you can't afford. That's the real estate agent's job. To sell you a loan that you can't afford. It's not supposed to be their job, but it's how they tend to think of themselves. Okay, it's how they tend to think of their business. Is